Are live on Shally's Alley, coming at you from a top secret, undisclosed location, my garage. With me today, live, we have the Finkster, the Finkinator, Brian Fink, Finkmeister.
What's going on, Shally?
What's up,
For those
man?
of you, dude, all right, so real quick, I'm giddy because I've gotten my learn on today. You know, if you, this is not a promo for Shally's webinar his masterclass, but dude, when you went into the shit with magical,
Yeah,
I was like, so that's how he does the 7 points of personalization at scale. I
that's
just was
exactly it.
like,
Yep, that's
okay.
exactly it. It's all there. The information is there, right? You're just personalizing with what's already on their profile.
Yeah. All right. So things that I learned this morning is I'm going to go back and I'm going to adjust a few of my custom search engines that I've let into the
Mm,
wild. There's some things there going to be some changes that I make on those programmable search engines,
yep.
particularly as the way that they either search the web or that they work on defined websites. So Shally took us through CSEs. That was awesome. Magical. I didn't know what to expect. I was like, this is just another, and then I was like,
Had you seen Magical before, or you just heard about it but didn't really know
so
what it was?
I thought that it was, so like I'd heard about it, and I was like, okay, this is neat. All right. So full disclosure, there are two envelopes for Brian. This is neat and holy shit. Okay,
Got it.
all right, and so this is definitely moved from the oh this is neat to the holy. I mean,
So
this
we
is
gotta
like
have it
Maddie.
now.
Yeah, I know what. So next week I'm going on spring break, but I know what I'm going to be
Mhm.
spending some time doing is this takes personalization to a completely different level because instead of me having to source say 20 candidates who all work at Google and then go and source 20 candidates that all work at AWS that I'm looking for cloud engineers, I can
Yep.
say, hey, notice your work at this company and at this company. That's really impressive, man. Like to have that kind of stature and be able to spend my time not spend my time
Not
effectively
clunking. Yeah.
personalizing.
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, so that
Yeah.
really
Because
just
we're used
got
to
me.
the old hack, right? Of like, in order to do hyper personalization with LinkedIn Recruiter, you basically have to group them together and find 20 people from Google and then say, hey, notice you work at Google, because there's no way to do any merges with fields in LinkedIn. But with this, you can. And so, you don't have to, like you said, narrow your field down to just a batch of people from one company. You can add stuff from everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that was awesome. So, Shally, I feel like we could talk about this, and that this isn't fair to people because they're kind of this is a paid class and they're not in it today. One of the things that I think we should talk about is the biggest development that I've heard of in the past 5 years in the talent acquisition space.
Oh, the big
Uh,
news.
the big
Yeah.
news. This, if you listened earlier, Chad and Cheese alluded to it on their podcast, but I think
Yeah.
that well, I'll just say it. Ryan Leary is leaving Recruiting Daily and is going to go be the major domo for David Monaster over at SourceCon and ERE. I mean, it's craziness.
Yeah. Editor in chief of SourceCon. That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
Big
this
news,
is
huh?
Yeah, I mean, the guy can barely write a sentence, and here it is that they're giving him the keys to the kingdom. He's really kind of played in all these different. I thought I thought when Ryan was like, "I'm going to make a career decision," he was going to come back to recruiting because he had been a recruiter before, and he says how jealous he is of all the fun that we're having. But I just
Especially in this
the,
market,
the left
right?
field. I was like, "What?
Yeah.
What? What is this?" Right? If you're just joining us, Ryan Leary, we hats off to you. I'm not wearing a hat, so hair off to you because
Hair
we
off. That's right.
hair off to
Peel
you.
peel the hair
Uh,
off.
yeah, just this is really incredible. Facebook user who is leaving whom. I can't see who the Facebook user is, but if you're just tuning in, Breaking news in the world of talent acquisition and recruiting: Ryan Leary is leaving Recruiting Daily, and he is taking David Monaster's job over at SourceCon and ERE. Just, something out of left field. I didn't expect to see this happen. This is
Totally
just
saw it
as
coming.
unpredictable as Will Smith getting up in the middle of the Oscars and slapping the hell out of Chris Rock, right?
Which I thought was staged, but apparently it's not.
So about that is shout out to a member of my team. Shout out to a member of my team who actually crushed this quarter, got more hires than anybody else. I don't know if I'm allowed to
Wow.
say. I don't know if I'm allowed to say. You know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say Jeff Stewart's name, but like he crushed it. Anyhow,
No,
long story
you can't share
short,
individual person's name, so don't say Jeff Stewart's name at all.
I will not say it again. So he crushed it, and we were having a conversation about whether or not it was a hoax, as in the slap, as an April Fool's Day joke, and like that
Mm.
Will Smith and Chris Rock were in on it, and that they'd placated this event, or they placated Jada's. Uh, I can't remember what is it. What is it called? I feel like I'm
Alopecia?
alopecia, right? Like that
Yeah,
they had,
yeah.
yeah, that this was some kind of joke. That's right. If you're just tuning in, Ryan Leary is going to go be the head of ERE Media. This is news to a lot of people. It kind of I remember the first time I met Ryan was actually at SourceCon in Austin, Texas, and that was the
Really?
first time that was the first time I'd met him, and I'm sure that they probably were having conversations then about what this was going to look like.
I don't remember meeting Ryan. It's been that long. Like it's been so long. It's been such a long time. I can't even. It's been a long time. He was at IBM when I met him. So however long ago that was, like
Yeah,
ancient times.
yeah. I mean, like, it was weird. Is that like the first person that I met from Recruiting Daily actually is Charney? Is that Matt Charney
Oh,
was at
okay.
Yeah, Matt Charney was at the conference where apparently I really upset somebody by using the four-letter word uh, that rhymes with duck. My mother may be listening to
Oh,
this on
right.
Facebook. I don't want my mother to think that I use that language all the time. Um, that's only, so it is what it is. But like
Yeah.
this news. But let's get back to this class, man, because this class was kick
Let's
ass.
talk about sourcing. I remember
Yeah.
having a conversation with you about this, and I thought it was something that would be interesting. In fact, that's what prompted me to say that you should come on the show. Um, is how different things are in your work environment. And um, you don't know this. I haven't told you this yet, but you inspired me to make a very big decision in my life that I'd never told anybody. I never told you, especially. You were talking about your new job, and I think you were giving a presentation, and you used the words compassionate employer. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember where that was or when that was, but that like changed my life right there. It woke me up to realize that if you're going to work with or for a company in this age now today where there are lots of choices, and in our market in recruiting where we're being heavily recruited by all kinds of organizations throwing crazy money. We talked about some of the offers that people are asking for salary, and it was like, what? And in this market, why should you work for a company that doesn't appreciate you, or even worse, a company that like devalues you, disrespects you, or whatever? So that was a huge thing for me. It's not like I never thought about I should work for a company that cares. It's just the way of thinking, the way that you explained it, and the things that you were talking about. So I want you to kind of tell us a little bit more about what it means to be a compassionate employer and how that's changed your life, because I know it's done that for you too.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, I currently am a senior sourcer with Twitter. Um, I think when I think about, so here's the deal. Today is Friday, and on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I take
Hmm.
an hour off to go pick up my daughter from
Good.
school, take her to Starbucks. Yes, she's 5 years old. You all have seen the pictures. She likes us to go to Starbucks and get a cookie and a cake pop. That's her
Hmm.
MO. Um, and the thing is that nobody expects me to do anything during that hour but to be a great dad, right? And when you think about the fact that we have employee resource groups at Twitter that put together care packages for dads and moms, I don't want to leave out the moms in the room. After all, I think
Hmm.
moms have been greater, more impacted because of COVID and having to really do double duty. Being a parent is a full time job, but being a parent during COVID, shout out to my wife, like she was total boss mode, total leader. But I digress, and I want to kind of stick on this note as to an organization that cares about you, that gives a damn about their employees, right? There are organizations that I've worked for, like a Cabbage, that really provided for their employees, whether it was catered meals every day or 100% or 100% health insurance, which are great benefits. One of the things that I look to at Twitter is the fact that we have dynamic leadership that is not only saying we have these benefits, but it's leadership that's also taking advantage of these leaderships. Shout out to Parag. I don't know that he's listening because this is not being streamed on Twitter Spaces, but like we have a
It is. This
CEO.
goes live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn.
Yeah, so shout out to Parag. Parag's a new dad. Congratulations on that. He's taking paternity leave. I don't know, like I think the last person in tech that took maternity leave was Marissa Mayer, and she got a lot of crud about it.
Mm,
She got a lot of garbage about it, right? And I think that we're in an age, a day and age when we can have a conversation about gender equality, and that means not only pay equality but responsibility equality. And those are some of the things that shine
right.
through for me at Twitter. I also think about some of the great mentors that I've had that have been at some of the companies that I've been a member of, like Relatech with Mark. Mark is a person who wanted to make sure that his people were empowered to do great things. And I think that's another thing, right? Like you can take a lot of time from the office, you can take time to go pick up your daughter. Are you really empowered to do big things in your organization, to stretch
Right.
across the to stretch across the aisle and to make we talk about talent having a seat at the table, right? So
Right.
like does
To
talent
contribute beyond what's in your rail of like your specialization, to be able to.
right.
Yeah, I get that. It's more than, I think what really struck me about what you were talking about was it's more than benefits, right? It's not benefits. It's not work-life balance. Those have been in the past just things people say at some companies, and at some companies they've been taken seriously. To give an example, in my experience, 25 years being in this business, Microsoft, I have to say, had the best benefits I've ever seen and probably will likely ever see again. Their benefits are spectacular, right? But benefits aren't what you're talking about. The benefits are that's something that you get in exchange for the time that you provide to your employer, along with your compensation and your salary. What you're talking about is an organization is that understands individuals as an individual, respects the individual, and like you said, gives them time to be with their family because that's important. And a person who spends time with their family is a better person at work because they don't not stressed out about, oh my god, I'm missing time with my family. So it benefits your family and it benefits your job, and it's done in a way that is designed to benefit both and values your contribution rather than tries to put you into a box and say, this is what's expected of you, you can only do this and nothing more, and you'll
Pull
have
these
to do this
levers.
during these times, right? Pull these levers at these times. And I get, there's shift work and there's people that have to work at a particular time and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, even if you're at a company that is requiring you to work at a certain schedule, there are still compassionate employers that do things that are caring, that recognize your uniqueness. And that, I think, is a much bigger step towards inclusion than anything else that we could do. It's actually recognizing individuals as individuals and respecting that individuality. To me, that was the biggest takeaway from that compassionate employer. Employers that actually get that.
Well, so as we're talking about inclusion, I just want to point out, today is the first day of April. Yesterday, however, was Trans Day of Visibility, right?
Hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of hate in this country that's bottled up. I guess I'm going to get political for a second. There's a lot of hate that's bottled up, and it's a dangerous time for employers to take dangerous stances
Hmm.
against these social norms. And like, I'm glad that I work for an organization that isn't afraid to stand up for people whose voices are not heard. Right? This is the it's a weird world that we live in, and I'm really glad that yesterday that Parag could take an hour of his time to be part of that initiative in our organization, and for it to be broadcast to the world, for us to shine a light. And a compassionate organization, I think, is one that doesn't just have values on a wall somewhere,
Right.
but that
Exactly.
actually lives those values and lets your heart shine.
Lives the values and gives you room to do what you want to do within the confines of what you have to do. There's what you have to do because it's your job and what you want to do, and then there's what wish you could do, right? Like you said. So for me, for example, I may not be when I was at Fiserv. Love my boss there, Holly. We're still in touch. She was such a great boss, a great manager, a great leader, and she gave me the I don't know, amplitude or the freedom to go play in the space of analytics. And I learned a lot about. I mean, I basically took like a crash course on finance and analytics from the tasks that I had said, I can do this. And she didn't just say, no, that's not your job, because that would have been very easy to do because my job was not that. She said, if you think you can do it, go ahead and do it. Let's try it and see how it works. Bring it back to me. And I did it and I brought it back. And she was like, this is great. Let's do more. And then she said, let's show this to my boss. And that is the difference. So she could have just said, this is great, and then showed it to somebody else and said, look what I did, or look what my team did. But she then said, hey, this is something one of my team members did. And then he wants to do more of this. And my job changed. And what I was doing became a lot more analytical. And it's had a significant impact in my career because I can now do the things with spreadsheets and data that CFOs expect, right? That's a huge thing. That's a
That's
huge thing to be
huge.
able to talk CFO when you're in talent. Sourcing doesn't usually have the access to the CFO, but when you're sourcing in analytics, you have that other door open. That would never have happened had my boss and my employer recognized that I'm more than a one-dimensional character, right? That I have these other hidden skills maybe I didn't even knew I had, right?
Exactly. And I think that's a trait of a good boss, right? Or like, okay, the word boss is like outmoded in managers, outmoded. Let's just use the term leader, because I mean, some leaders have people responsibilities, some don't. But like,
That's true, right?
I think it's a good sign I think it's a sign of a good leader when they help you stretch your professional capabilities in new and interesting ways, and they give you the latitude to do so.
Love that. Totally love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good definition of a compassionate employer. Yeah. So how is sourcing different at Twitter? Tell me something
Oh,
about how sourcing is done that you can share that won't, I don't want any confidential information. I don't want anybody chasing after me with um,
no,
legal
no, I
legal
mean,
pads.
so I think that one of the things that makes sourcing different at Twitter is that Shally. Okay, so folks, real quick, Shally and I, we do live in Atlanta. We do meet up for dinner. There is a picture of from 5 years ago of Shally holding my daughter, and it says "The Godfather of Sourcing." So like, we have deep conversations, but we also have conversations that are not as deep. But one of the conversations that we return to all the time is, what is a sourcer? What is a recruiter?
Right.
Right? And one of the things that I think that makes sourcing different at Twitter is that we're not just focused on quote unquote doing the research and getting the candidate in the door. We're making sure that the candidate is interested, educated, and qualified for the role before we ever make an introduction to the hiring manager. And once we make that introduction to the hiring manager, we're carrying the candidate through the process until we get them to our recruiter at that final step, and then we pull that recruiter in to make sure that we are prepping our candidates for success. I think that because of what we're doing, we're having an overall more of a success rate at the top of the funnel, and also um, at the bottom of the funnel when it comes to close. There's somebody who's asking how many of my prospects come
How many are
from
come through?
Twitter.
Right. It's a good
Yeah, yeah,
question.
that's a great question. So I'm really
100% because they all have to go to Twitter to apply. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, no. That would be a, it's funny. Most of my candidates do not come from Twitter. Most of my candidates actually come from GitHub or from conference lists.
Mhm.
I try to find. I don't think I'm telling a secret here. I think it's pretty well established is that Twitter is making a move to the public cloud, with using resources like AWS and GCP and Kubernetes, and we want to find the best. So who are the best? Well, you go to GitHub and you look at the people who are contributing to the Kubernetes API, and you reach out to them and say, "Hey, are you open to a conversation?" Or you go to speaker lists like DevNexus, which is coming up in Atlanta in a few weeks, or DevOps Days, which is going to be in Atlanta, I think the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Um, and you see who the speakers are, you see who the presenters are, and you say, you try to find, like, I spend a good amount of time on research, right? And these people teach me things. If I go to their talk, or if I live stream their talk, or if I watch their talk on YouTube, it provides me with a really clearer insight as to who they are, what they're about, what they feel is a challenge. I mean, I don't want to reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, come be a SRE at Twitter," when clearly they're way beyond SRE and they're kind of defining that role at Google. I want to make sure that that I'm quote unquote being having appropriate. Trisha, any advice for someone setting up a new sourcing team? I've created the foundations yet want to. I have created the foundations yet want to set the team up for success. Um, Shally, do you want to handle that one because
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
built
I can do
teams.
that.
I mean, I've done it. It's
Yeah, I have quite a bit actually. Some of the most successful teams out there in the industry. Happy to help. Trisha, it'd probably be a good idea for us to kind of touch base one on one, individually, so that I can gather a little bit more about what you're doing. But the best advice I can give you on starting a sourcing team and getting it the foundations is to really focus on removing friction in however way. Different organizations have different ways of creating, I would even say, artificial friction. But when you start a sourcing team, there's a lot of not understanding what sourcers do. As a matter of fact, Brian and I were just talking about how there's not a very clear definition of what the difference is between a sourcer and a recruiter. And forget that, right? Forget defining the difference between a sourcer and recruiter. Define what your team does. Don't worry about defining the role for others or for the industry. Define what it is that your team's going to do and put the boundaries on and say, this is how we're going to do it. And try to remove as much friction as possible, because it is the hardest job. Okay. I'm not saying recruiting is easy. I'm not saying that at all. Recruiting is also hard, but sourcing is harder and more challenging in a lot of ways because you don't have as much access to the hiring manager. You may have, but not as much. You don't have as much access to the brand name behind the company. You can't deal with applicants that are coming in usually, unless you're allowed to do that. We have to sometimes operate in the dark in a lot of ways. We may even provide candidates and not get any feedback in many ways. So a lot of what we do is already very what's the word I'm looking for? Brian, help me out. It's like hidden.
opaque.
It's like we're,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. A lot of what we do is very opaque. So creating friction, it just adds more suspicion to that. So try to remove that as much as possible. The only other thing I would say, without knowing more about your team, that you have to make sure is don't fall in love with tools. I see this all the time with customers when I was a consultant. Recruiters that like the organization will buy. I'm not even going to name a tool, XYZ tool, and they'll use it for 6 months, and then the next one comes around and they get a call from a marketing person and they buy that tool, and then they switch over and they get the other one, and the other. Listen, tools don't make a sourcer. In a sourcing team, quite frankly, sourcing can be done, as my friend Amanda used to say, with crayons and a notepad. Okay. Yes, it's harder, and you definitely can use tools, but if you make your team tool dependent or force them to use certain specific tools, it creates more. It reduces the flexibility, reduces the creativity. Sourcing is very different in recruiting in one significant way, and that is recruiting is systemic. It's a system. Recruiters have to follow certain rules. There's applicant flow logs, there's EEOC, there's a ton of regulation, 7 different governing bodies. You may not even be aware of 7 different governing bodies that affect us, from the Privacy Act to Sarbanes-Oxley, that affect what we do. And sourcing has to have these boxes that are checked, things that need to be get done, whether it's a background check or a reference check or an application, whatever. There are rules. Sourcing doesn't have any, because we're trying to find what isn't already being found by recruiting. So we have to invent it. And if we're told this is how you do it and these are the tools that you use it, and 6 months later these are the tools you use it, it doesn't really help us do our job. So removing friction, number one, and don't be a tools user. Use tools, but don't depend on them.
I agree with Shally. The only thing that I would add to that is it teach the fundamentals, right? Like if you have the fundamentals, like when Shally was showing, am I frozen?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was like, let it go. One of the things that, yeah, one of the things that Shally did when he was showing people how to set up their own Google custom search engine is he leveraged in title, in text, and the site command. And when leveraging those tools, those are basics. Like I don't think Google is going to change how they do search, right? They may change the algorithm because for SEO purposes and for SEM purposes, but they're not. I mean, there are some standard operators that they're not going to change. They may retire them, but they're not going to change the basic ones, right? And I think that if you set people up for success by showing them the basics, then they can put the building blocks together. It's like Maddie with Legos, right? Like
Yeah, I
she's
got you.
building she's
Good
building
analogy.
Yoda right now, right? Like she knows like how to snap bricks, she knows how to read the book, but she didn't start off building Yoda, right?
Right,
So
right,
it's
right, right, right.
it's like Legos.
I
Um,
can't build Yoda.
yeah. So
Well,
real
listen,
quick,
Brian, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, especially given how busy you are and everything. Let's do this again. Let's keep the conversation going and have another chat. In a few weeks or a month or
all
so
right.
when you have some more time. I know you're going to be taking some well-deserved time off, so enjoy your vacation. Thank you for being here, and bye, everybody. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye.